letting the director stand behind. You're the director. I'm the technician. I'm just loosening everybody.
Oh,
Let's give him more jobs. Hey, Lynn, does Wi-Fi work in this room? Will I be able to get emails? Okay.
welcome to Seminole State's discussion for Black Minds Matter, a 10-week course focused on black boys and men in education. Hi, I'm Dr. Maya Byfield, and we are live at Altamont Springs campus. Yeah. Yeah, go Altamont, go Altamont. Each session is going to be videotaped, so welcome Sanford campus, welcome Oviedo campus, Heathrow. Thank you guys for joining us. We're going to talk about our role of policing and schooling in black minds. So, at the core of Seminole State's value system is respect, and we welcome diversity of thought. And so here's some ground rules. Be able to critique ideas, not individuals. Listen actively and with an ear for understanding other people's views. Step up and step back. Respect one another's opinions, even if you don't agree with them. And of course, be conscious of time. I'm a professor here, and I have a 2 o'clock class, so let's be on time. If you have any comments, please communicate any other comments to Dr. Gerald Jones at Jones, Jonesg, at seminolestate.edu. We have some students here, actually. So we're going to first, before we start getting off into the discussion questions, we're going to talk about their experience as students. What you'll do is you'll introduce yourself and just talk about your experience here in college or at Seminole State, or just being a student, a college student in general.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's D. Bowie, and I'm currently a pre-med student here at Seminole State. And so far, my time here, my 3 years here at Seminole State have been really good. I give most of that due to the fact that the professors, they're really caring, they're really involved, and they really take their time out to invest in you. So overall, the experience has been great. I plan to transfer out of here soon, and they've also made that process really easy as well. As far as the school goes, advisors, you find the right one, they're really caring as well. They're really caring. The administration, they're really good as well. Just the overall campus between Altamont, Sanford, Oviedo, I haven't had any problems with anybody, so it's been really great, and they're all really involved.
Oh boy. Hi everybody, my name is Julio August. August has an E at the end, I don't know why. I mainly go here at the Altamont campus, though I've been to the Sanford and Oviedo campus, and when I first started coming here, I was just like any other student. I just came to classes and I left, but then I had somebody pull me into this leadership role I'm in now, and he really raised me up. He made sure that I knew what I was doing. He put me past that stereotype, everything I'm going through, and he helped me get to where I am today.
Hi, my name is Nadia Doxity. This is my first year in college. So far, it has been an amazing experience. I thought that I could come and just run through the college course like I did in high school, but I had a professor who sat me down and explained to me that college is not the same as high school. And so far, it has been a pleasant experience, no problems. And just as the first student said, everything has been positive, caring staff, caring professors, and all in all, go Seminole State.
Okay, so we'll get right into our discussion questions. If you watch the video, it was about policing and schooling black minds, and I thought the video was intriguing, connecting the lack of or the different reasons why black lives seem to not matter through policing, through over criminalization, and how they connected it to the similar behaviors in the school system that may lead to the school to prison pipeline. It was kind of, as he said, it wasn't discouraging is the word he said, but it was kind of hard to hear. And he said it would get lighter from now on. I hope that's the case. But it was amazing to see the connection with overcriminalization of black men, and we're seeing it in the school system. So we'll start off with the first question. Brainstorm some common racial stereotypes. From your perspective, how do these stereotypes influence policing and educational practices?
Well, I think a really common stereotype is how some black men speak, because if they have an accent, most people assume that they're uneducated or that they don't know what they're really talking about, and thus they'll kind of just swat them away and not give them the time of day that they would give most other people.
I know some other common stereotypes would include that all Asians are smart and all Asians are good in math and all American Indians are alcoholics and all individuals who are not born in the United States and are people of color are just here for a free ride and probably snuck in illegally.
Stereotypes. Right. Excuse me. Right, so to answer the question, Dr. Maya addressed actually some of the racial stereotypes that Dr. Wood mentioned. Talked about the black men, black boys are criminals, and also they are devalued. I mean, so looking at that and also talk about how those stereotypes influence policing and in the educational settings. So if we go looking at those stereotypes based on policing, I mean, my take on that is like you would see a black man or black boy driving a car, I mean, passing a police officer, and then the officer might think because of the stereotypes that black boys and men are criminals, so that's telling them that there might be a gun in the car. So hey, let's pull these people over and then search them or even, you know, talk to them about something, you know. But in the educational settings, I mean, it could be looked at as maybe the black students are lazy if maybe they're not doing the work. Maybe you see a student coming to class late, and you know, why they're coming to class late? I mean, maybe they don't want to do the work. Or in exam, if they don't do well, let's say, well, maybe the black students are going to cheat, you know. I mean, they just want to take this shortcut. So, I mean, so if we apply those stereotypes to education and policing, these are my reasons for explaining that.
Another stereotype to me is sometimes depends on the community that you're from or from the neighbor you're from. For example, if you tell someone, oh, I'm from Pine Hills, where you from? I'm from Pine Hills. Automatically something goes off and they say, oh, Pine Hills. I mean, in Pine Hills, we've got all types of persons living, and we've got all kind of races there. So therefore, to just stereotype someone of color coming from Pine Hills that, oh, you're a gangster, oh, you're a drug addict, or you're just worthless. I mean, that is one of the things that I've personally come into contact with because of the area that I'm born and not what comes out of my mouth, first of all.
I think I have some also to add from the video. Dr. Wood talked about beasts of prey. I don't know if you all remember that particular phrase from his video, and some examples of some of the stereotypes that came with that were black males are thugs, They're deviant, combative, disruptive, violent, criminal. And I thought that that was interested in terms of how sometimes that, in terms of Black Lives Matter, it goes from influencing policing, and then from the Black Minds Matter, it can also carry over into our institutions of higher learning. And it is something that we should be mindful of as we attempt to serve all students, those particular examples of what it means to be a beast of prey.
I think one big stereotype that, you know, a lot of people see but they don't say because it's so programmed in their mind is that when you see a Black guy driving a nice car or having nice things, he's automatically either an athlete or a drug dealer or something like that. And it's just so common now that, you know, it's you know, instilled in somebody's mind that when they see that, that's the first thing that comes to their mind, not that, oh, they may have their PhD or, oh, they're an accomplished manager or something like that.
Yeah, I see how that can relate to policing. You know, what got my attention was when they did a research study on police shooting unarmed versus armed individuals, and they were really accurate, much more significantly accurate when shooting a Black man with a gun than any other race with a gun. At the same time, they were very inaccurate in not shooting Black men that did not have guns. So it seems like it feels like, I'm not saying this is the case, that they shoot first when they assume that a Black man has a gun. And at the same time, they connect that to minds where the increased punishment of preschoolers, like a really high amount of Black preschoolers get suspended from school as compared to their other counterparts. So we're seeing we call it bias or an implicit bias in policing as well as punishing in the school system. I thought that was, and it had to do with probably an implicit stereotype of beast of prey, that, you know, these students aren't as valuable. It feels that way.
I think that goes along with the point also made in the video that the research showed that individuals who were perceived to be older than their actual age were Black, and those who were perceived to be younger were white, and the result of that came to be the more adult punishment for those perceived to be older, and therefore the loss of innocence, I think, was the term that was used in the video. Not giving someone the benefit of the doubt, not stopping to think that he might be playing a prank as opposed to being disruptive or destructive. And so it's the opposite of the halo effect, whatever that might be. You know, when you like someone and you say, he was just playing a trick. Wasn't that kind of funny? Come on, I know it wasn't good judgment, but it was kind of funny, wasn't it? And the opposite of the halo effect is everything this student does is to get me, get my goat, get me riled up. You need to go to the principal's office and you need to be suspended.
I think also he talks about the experience of being a Black learner in the classroom is different from the white, and it talks about the brazen indifference. He talks about that, and we see that, or looking at the criminalization of students in the learning spaces. He talks about that also, where, I mean, in most schools, I mean, you have the resource officers, they do the randomized checks, the mental detectives. I mean, but again, if these are things in the schools, I mean, and the stereotypes going back to the Black boys and men are criminals, so you would kind of expect the thinking in the schools you're going to have the same behavior that the stereotypes about these Black boys and men. Yeah.
I think that Janet kind of summed it up, and Dr. Joe mentioned it as well in terms of Black boys, Black men are being expelled or suspended for small infractions, as Dr. Wood described, because according to him, there is a disregard for their youthfulness. And he used those examples of the Trayvon Martin murder, how, according to George Zimmerman, he thought that Trayvon was around his age, and also the police who killed Tamir Rice thought that he was much older than what he appeared to be. And so it is a disregard of youthfulness, and that was something that I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, Tamir Rice was 12 years old. And can you imagine a 12-year-old just, it took 2 minutes to shoot him. Yeah, that was amazing to me. Let's get to our next question. Our next question says, reflect on when you first became aware of racial bias. What experience or experiences had to happen for you to become aware of racial bias?
Again this week, something very difficult to share, but these are supposed to be discussions that are truthful. I went to Catholic school, and I never had any black students in my classes. I never had any experiences with anyone black being in my social circle. The first experience I had that repulsed me, I can't figure out why it did, because I was not raised to be repulsed. But it was from hearing someone say, roll up your windows, and I do mean roll them up from that time. Roll up your windows and lock your doors. We're going down Hammondville Road in Pompano Beach. Now, I didn't know what that was. I was maybe 8. And the answer was, it's the black section of town. Roll up your windows and lock your doors. Like everyone was going to jump in and take me away. And how that repulsed me, I don't know, because it was my family saying it to me.
Well, my first, as far as I can remember, it was the first time, right? So I believe was when, I don't even remember how old I was. I'm from New York City, and Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, a young black man was chased by 5, I think, or I don't know, a few white gentlemen in Bensonhurst, and they beat him to death with bats. And the next thing you know, my father took me out to protest. I had a green band on my hand, and that's the first time I remember racial issues.
I think it's kind of ironic because I've always been aware of racial bias, but you never really paid attention until it happens to you. So both of my mother and my stepfather are both veterans in law enforcement. And when I graduated high school, I decided to stay at my great-grandmother's house and help her. And one morning I was getting ready for school to come here actually, and I heard a knock at the door, and I was like, I had on my joggers, no shirt, just getting ready. I had just took my dog out, and I answered the door, and I was like, who is it? And they were like, Seminole County Sheriff's Office. And I was like, okay. And I opened the door, and before I had a chance, you know, to even gather myself, he grabbed me and yanked me out the door. So the first thing that comes to my mind is like, you know, what is he doing? So the first thing that he does, he brings me outside for one, with no shirt on, no shoes, and then he pushes me up against the wall, and asking me, am I this person? You know, and I responded to him, no. And I was like, I don't even know who you're talking about. And the only people that were in the house, that would be in the house, was me and my great-grandmother, because I was helping take care of her, and just me. And she wasn't there that morning because my grandmother actually came and took her to the hospital. And he kept asking, was I this person? I kept responding to him, no. So another officer proceeded to come around from the back, and she said she was at the back just in case I tried to run out, which I was trying to figure out what she was talking about that for. And he proceeded to ask me, was I involved in a armed robbery that night? And I said, no, I can show you my ID, but they also put me in handcuffs at the time against the wall outside. So now I'm thinking, I'm like already 30 minutes late for school, but I'm not even thinking about that. So they finally let me go back in the house after I've told them I'm not this person 2 or 3 times. And I had to somehow maneuver and try to get my wallet with handcuffs on. They couldn't even grab it for me. And I handed in my wallet and showed them that I wasn't the person. And just to skip forward a little bit, the person that they were looking for was probably, 6'3". I'm 5'9" at best, a little bit more light-skinned than me, different name. And the name that they were actually looking for is, because he's the son, they were actually looking for the son, but his father had his name there, but his father doesn't even live in the state. So they were looking for the wrong person twice, pretty much. They didn't even know what they were looking for. And plus, prior to, they had spoken to people outside, and they asked the people outside, who lives there? And they told them there should only be 2 people in the house. And, if the blinds are closed, that means nobody's there because I'm either going to school or work. So come to find out, I told the lady, I was like, you made me late for school, you brought me outside, and you didn't read me any kind of Miranda rights or anything like that. You didn't give me due process or anything like that. You just automatically yanked me out the door. And I told them, my cousin, he actually plays for the University of Florida now. He's a really big guy. And if he would have been there, it would have been a different story, But I ended up calling my mother because she was still in tenure at the sheriff's office. And, it's just crazy because she had been working with those people for 25 plus years. So for me, somebody who's always been in, like sheriff lunches and, meetups, get-togethers, it was just astounding at how somebody could be so prejudiced and biased at the same time. And you've been with them, multiple times, around them. And it just goes to show you. And I told my mom, it's going to be hard for me to accept who law enforcement officers are, from now on, because every time I see one, I'm automatically going to think, oh, I know what they're thinking in their head, So I think it's a really big deal for me, somebody who's never even stolen anything, to go through something like that. I think we need to bring a lot of awareness to that.
My first time would be when I was helping my aunt move into her new house in Port St. Lucie. We had the cops called on us because they thought we were trying to squat inside the house because it wasn't really a place where black people moved to or lived. So we had to deal with the entire day the cops coming back and forth and trying to make sure that it was actually her house and she owned it. It really opened my eyes to the real divide between the amount of people and where they live.
I have one that I would like to add. I've always kind of known what racial bias was, being taught what it was, and then how do you respond to it. But one of the memories real quickly that I had of being experience of racial bias was unfortunately by policing as well. And I was in Gainesville picking up a fraternity brother of mine, and we were on our way to Georgia. And as I was getting ready to leave his apartment complex, a cop came up behind me for no reason at all when it turns out. And he flashed his lights, and it was in August, so mind you of how hot it was. He said, "Driver, get out and put your hands up." And I'm sweating. I'm like, what did I just do? And he said, "Where are you going?" I had to get out of the car, and this was like 8 years ago. I had to get out of the car. He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Georgia to train on diversity." for an institution of higher learning that hired me as a consultant to train on diversity. And everyone was looking at me, of course. He had the megaphone out, get out of the car. And then I was like, what did I do? And his comment was, and I'm going to leave it at this, we just have some suspicious activities in this community lately. And I guess because I was black and driving a red car, that probably did not help. But, and we left it. But it was a good story to tell as I went to Georgia.
Well, I mean, I have a lot of experience, but I'm going to actually just talk about one. One time in Lake Mary, in fact, I had a final exam I was giving at Seminole State, 5 o'clock. That was for my, I think, sociology course. But I had to run to Lake Mary to buy something. So the class was at 5. So, I mean, in fact, where did I go? I think to Publix. So when I was in the parking lot, a white lady backed into me, I mean, hit my car, came out of the car, apologized to me, said she was wrong, she didn't see me. I said, well, ma'am, we still have to call the police. She said, no, let's just talk about it here. I said, no, ma'am, let's just call the police to get the report. She said, again, I'm very sorry, it's my fault. Once the police show up, guess who they came to? I mean, so they allowed the white person to explain what happened. Now, the conversation changed. She didn't apologize anymore. And the police officer told the white lady, you could go now. For me, they asked for my driver's license and insurance and had me sat on the floor. I said to the officer, I had an exam to give us Seminole State. Number one, you even didn't hear my reasoning for what happened. No, I don't want to hear that. And then wrote me a ticket. Wow. I mean, so, I mean, I could continue, but it was a bad day. It was a bad day.
Anybody else want to talk about their first time? It's really about the first time, just becoming aware. I mean, I have tons of experiences as well. I'm not going to talk about my experience, but anybody else wants to talk about when they became aware of racial bias? Okay, we'll just move on. We'll move on to number 3. How do you combat racial bias at school or at work? One of my, this is a personal experience of mine, and some people feel it's, oh, you look young, but it's a struggle sometimes to have to prove who I am. I went through schooling. I thought taking tests was enough to prove who I am. I have a PhD, and unfortunately, it feels like everywhere I go, I have to prove who I am. I can have 3 stripes on my lapel or on my robe for graduation, and they just don't have the expectation that I belong. And it's so, one of the biggest things that I think professional African Americans face is that they have to, in their own mind, feel they have to prove on top of just do great work. And I'll never forget, I had to show ID one time to park. I'll never forget it. I had the faculty tag in my car, and somehow that wasn't enough. And I wonder, has anybody else in faculty, for instance, or staff had to show ID on top of their tag? It was upsetting, and I realized that unfortunately, it can inhibit someone if they feel that they have to prove. They just can't be themselves and just be. So I think at school or at work, we must just have the bare minimum of respect and high expectations of people. So for instance, if you see a faculty and staff tag, just believe it's there. Even if you feel in your heart they stole it, you can't prove it, right? And so if you would not do that for a white professor or a white faculty member, don't do it for anybody. Like, give everyone the benefit of doubt. And you'll be surprised. You might have to look past your bias to do so. but give everyone the benefit of doubt. Whatever the base requirement is, just do that. And I think that we can combat racial bias at work based on that.
Can I add something real quickly? For those of us who are streaming we're at Altamont this week, at Sanford Lake Mary and our Oviedo campus, we realized this week that the questions are drafted kind of differently, and which allows more time for some reflections or brainstorming. We're going to be wrapping up here at Altamont Springs probably within the next 10 minutes, which will give you the opportunity at your locations to further dive into the questions for reflections. And if our facilitators there or our co-facilitators at those locations could jot down some notes that as we get back as a steering committee, we'll be able to include what you may have learned for our work forward. Thank you.
So how can we combat racial bias at school or work?
One of the concepts that we talked about this week was the super predator, the idea of the complete dehumanization of the black male in school and the recharacterization as someone who had either become amoral or immoral as the first impression. And the amoral went with the adjectives such as soulless, uncaring, in other words, a person without values regarding human life completely. And that carried from the policing setting to the education setting. And that super predator label is something that bothers me a great deal, because we do live in the real world. We do see some shooters this weekend who were not African American that you might want to put in the super predator category of completely without morals. The idea of a super predator, I think, is crucial for this week's analogy, the policing to the higher education, because it implies all of those disciplinary models that we've already discussed that take the child out of the classroom for suspension when another child might just be spoken to. And this concept I thought was very important this week, and I wanted to make sure it was discussed.
I mean, yes, that concept of the super predator, I mean, is real. In fact, I had a friend whose daughter in one of the middle schools in Seminole County was videotaping a fight. And she was in part of the brawl, but she was taking pictures of the fight. And she was suspended. My friend's daughter was suspended, out of state suspension. But again, the infraction was confrontational. Now the question becomes, you're suspending somebody's daughter for out of state, and that's one of the most egregious actually punishments, where you have, I mean, in school suspension, you have, I mean, detention, Saudi school, but they went all the way to out of school suspension. And he was talking to me, you know, I thought that was really wrong. But that's the idea that even Dr. Jones talked about. I mean, the label giving to black boys and men about, you know, their behavior. I mean, being stereotyped as criminals. And if you look at the video, also talk about the Brown, is it Brown office? The Brown death. I mean, what was his name? The first name? The Officer Wilson, Ferguson, Missouri, when that event that happened over there when they killed.
Darren Wilson, I think, something like that.
The name is Brown.
Mike Brown.
Mike Brown, there you go, Mike Brown, right. So what did he say? Officer said what? He appears what?
Devilish, demonic.
Exactly,
yeah.
Angry, I mean aggressive, like a demon. So these are the stereotypes, and the over-exclusionary Janet is talking about in the schools is really bad. And I'm working with this parent, I mean, talking to the principal, myself actually, asking the questions, why the girl was suspended for videotaping, but in the infraction it states confrontational. And why didn't you, I mean, punish the girl in school suspension, detention, Sunday school? Why you went all the way to out of school? And this is the reason. Why do we think the student was suspended. I mean, why? There was nothing gained at the suspension. The daughter was watching TV, sleeping. So you're depriving the daughter from not attending classes, not learning anything. And what happened? Going back to the pipeline for what? The prison that he talks about earlier. So we have to be careful with that.
I think a really good way to combat racial bias is starting at the grade school level, because even as me being in grade school, 3rd grade, 4th grade, I saw a lot of my friends that were black, of course, and they were pretty much labeled as habitual criminals because they were constantly being thrown out of the classroom for, you know, small stuff, and it's because it was just a repetitive cycle. And the teacher saw that, oh, this child is going to be troublesome, so every time he gets in trouble, I'm not even going to consider, you know, giving him a chance. I'm just going to throw him out the classroom. And you'll see a trend as they get older. You know, in middle school, it gets slightly worse. They're doing slightly worse things. Now they don't even care because there isn't that that either father figure or mother figure in their life at school, not at home, but at school, because that's what I feel a lot of, you know, teachers should be, because you're in one class the whole year and you have one teacher. And then you see as they get to high school, oh, now they're really a criminal. So it just becomes a constant cycle inside of their head that they keep doing that. So I think that if at the grade school level, teachers start becoming more compassionate and involved in the kids' lives, considering where they come from or what kind of situation they might be in, just like we might do somebody with a certain mental disease or illness, you know, we're going to give them a certain treatment. So if you see that this child may have, you know, may not have a father in their life, or may be, you know, predisposed to, you know, violence all the time around them, you know, grab them one time and tell them, hey, I understand where you're coming from. Don't just automatically push them out of the classroom and say, you know, I don't want anything to do with you. Because the sad fact is that there's so many, you know, great minds out there that are being wasted because they're either in jail or dead. And it's just something that we really have to bring a lot of awareness to.
Going back on off of what he said, I agree with him completely. And an example of that is my younger brother, he goes here as well. And when we were in grade school, one of his teachers would actively seek him out and call our mother, call our parents to tell him about what he's doing and how he's succeeding in classroom. And they would schedule meetings with our parents just to talk to him about them, talk to him about him and how he's succeeding. So I feel like that sort of care towards the different minds of individuals really goes a long way, because now he's here, he's succeeding, he's on the president's list. I think it's dean's list. I think it is. But yeah, he's pretty good. Pretty good.
Just to expand on what was said earlier, I think that students like that, in order to cut down or to curb that behavior, we need to have parent meetings, have one-on-one. Presently in psychology, we're discussing the mind of the toddler and infant child. And if we have that conversation with the child and parent, maybe we can curb these behaviors and cut down on the racial mindset. As far as to combat racial biasness, for me at work and at school, coming from the Caribbean, I've never been involved or experienced racial biasness, but I've seen and heard about it. So my mindset is that, Nadia, whatever you do, you've got to give your best. So therefore, no one can point any finger at you and say, oh, you're minority, or you're not going to succeed, or anything like that. So anything that I do, even at my job, I'm always the first to say, oh, yeah, I will stay back. Yeah, I will cover that shift. And at school, I feel like I'm trying to give my best, or I'm willing to give my best. I'm trying my best to succeed the best way that I can. So in order to put all that biasness aside, I'm like, Nadia, just go forward. Give it 110%.
I just have something to say real quick. I mean, just going back to the question, how to combat racial bias. I think all of us are socialized differently, and we all make mistakes sometimes. But in combating this in the schools, I think it's important to engage sometimes in difficult conversation about race. That's very important. And then it's difficult to really, remove those unconscious biases that we have. But again, if we're honest in our inner self and understand that our perception, are not always what's real, maybe that would help in changing how we perceive people. So, I mean, I think engaging in those conversations about race is very, very important.
I agree. And just to piggyback what we're saying, the fact that we, Nadia, as you were saying, just do your best and be the best. And, the fact that sometimes we have to feel the pressure to be the best can actually cause fear within us. And that's the problem that we're seeing in Black professionals today, that they have a lot of pressure to overachieve, and the pressure just to overachieve is actually hurting them. And so the next and last question would be, how could our education and justice systems better serve Black males in the community? What can we do about this to better serve? I think what you gave was a great example. Your teacher or your brother's teacher really invested in showing the good things about him, and it made him do better. But what are other ways?
Well, I think in my opinion, I think it's always good to rely on the literature and to rely on the research. And it was interesting how Dr. Woods presented a study that was conducted in Florida, and he said more stringent punishments for Black males have stricter punishment than their white counterpart. And that report was called Same Crime, More Time.
More time.
And for Black minds, in terms of, he was saying that we see that even in education, how our students are suspended is more stringent punishment than their white counterparts. But in conclusion, to answer specifically the question, he talked about changing the paradigm of having more empathy for our students, all of our students, but for the purpose of this particular course, our students of color, and particularly Black males. And then, as Dr. Joe mentioned earlier, of checking your own biases, having that honest conversation with yourselves, so sometimes it's hard to do. And then in checking your biases, perhaps you're learning your biases. And so I just thought that was something that could be recommended moving forward in terms of what we can do as a community of higher education.
I would like to suggest that we engage the campus in some activity that deals with the bias and how to remove it. I think we've all been to workshops on how to identify bias, but maybe not enough of how to remove it. There are some videos where they show you the top half of a scene, and sometimes it's a biker with his hair pulled back and his hands like this and his expression. And then when they reveal the bottom half, he's pushing a stroller. He's not a biker frowning at you. He's looking into the sun and he's pushing a stroller. There's nothing threatening about him when you see the entire context. So I would like to suggest that we put on our list of possible action items a campus-wide training that would teach us to look and assess and ask before jumping to conclusions.
Right. I would go back to Dr. Woods, framework about his course. The idea of that we need to eliminate, again, disdain, distrust, and disregard, and extol the brilliance and dignity of the morality of the Black students. I think that's important to do. And also in the institution, utilize the Faculty Institute. Maybe having workshops on diversity. I think we have a Diversity Council under the leadership of Janet, and continue to have those discourse with all the faculty and staff, and just having a talk about race issues. And I want to go back to the video and then end up with this, the quote that Dr. Wood gave, where he says, "Black lives and Black minds are inextricably intertwined. For if one does not value the life, then they certainly cannot value the mind." So I'm going to just leave it like that.
I think we should be careful of the tone. Sometimes there's certain things that we're trying to display, and we use certain words like probation. You know, probation is probably not a good word to try to motivate black males, right? Or you know, sometimes in younger years there would be when you acted poorly, you got a black card, or versus a red card versus a yellow card. Try to find different ways to demonstrate the education or the activities of these young men. I give an example. When I was a kid, I talked a lot in elementary school, and so my teacher, who was a white female, I think she's one of my favorite teachers, my second grade teacher, she would create incentives of excellence. So she gave extra work for me to do rather than punish me. She gave me extra work for me to do and would give me a gold star, and then would have me compete with other students to get to see how many of us could get the highest amount of gold stars. And so I did get the highest amount of gold stars, and I got a gift. And so she was able to counteract my behavior positively versus just punishing me. So try to mind our tones. Instead of trying to punish students for bad behavior, incentivize them and teach them to be better.
I think the education system could definitely benefit a lot by doing three things: integration, application, and involvement. And I think it's really crazy because I grew up having, you know, white friends and black friends as well, and it was just, they were just polar opposites in what they did. And I think that in the classroom, if the teacher is more involved in integrating more, you know, elements that are, you know, comfortable to people that live in African American society, things may work smoother. And they apply those things as well as saying, oh, well, since you do this, then let's try to do this in class today. Or, like I said, just incorporating those elements are going to make a student, for one, feel a lot more comfortable in the setting. Because I know I feel a lot more comfortable when I see things that, you know, I grew up with, whether it may be a certain learning element or whether it may be a certain history, or even just, you know, learning about, especially like a perfect example is in speech class. And when we learned about a lot of, you know, black history figures and also incorporated them in the classroom, and everybody in the classroom really took a stand on it and wrote a speech about it, it made everybody more comfortable on the point. So in that sense, you have a lot more confidence and satisfaction that you're on a level playing field at that time. So if we could just do those three things: integrate, apply, and get more involvement, I think that the school system would benefit greatly from a lot of black males.
Oh, well, that gets me. I think that the justice system could use a little work, because I'm sure that we could go back, let's say it's 2018, five decades from now, and we could look at the books and find a lot of laws that were rooted in systemic racism, and we could find laws that were mainly there to target and put down black people in their education. And while I'm sure that some of them have been scrubbed off the books, that not all of them have been scrubbed off.
I just want to say one more thing too, and I kind of just said it here, so it's kind of contradictory, but I think that if we stop using the terms black and white to discern from people, I think that everything will be a lot more inclusive and it'll amalgamate a lot better, because I noticed that when people use those terms to, you know, address someone, then you automatically associate those biases with them and those, you know, different things about them. You're going to say, oh, well, this person is black, or this black person, or why not call them by their name? I think that's the easiest way to go about things.
Interesting. Start calling people by, learning people's names and calling people by their name, and learning about their culture, but not limiting to just one type of demographic. I like that. Well, we're giving you guys a lot of time to converse with one another and reflect back with these discussions. I thank you so much for being a part of this. My name is Dr. Maya Byfield, and this is Black Minds Matters. I hope you have a good amount of time to discuss and reflect on policing and schooling Black minds. Good afternoon.